book club.
I actually looked up a couple recipes for this just to like see if I've been doing it right, because this is one of my favorite drinks and none of them had bitters. So I don't know why I do that, but I do.
Nom 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 nom. Today we are making a dark and stormy. There's a quote in the lid of Grace ginger beer. Give me sponge if you go dry up sea. It basically means like you've given me an impossible task. Like you're gonna give me a sponge to dry up the whole sea. Wow, I stuttered a lot there. Anyways, cheers. I think my favorite part of making a that's gross. I just stuck my finger in my drink. Well, it's my drink, so I guess it's fine. My favorite part of making a dark and stormy at home is that there's always extra ginger beer, and the ginger beer is the best part. I mean, the rum is nice, but the ginger beer. And Grace ginger beer is so gingery. I should drink that slower, but you know I can just top myself up. So today's video is gonna kind of be a wrap-up-ish. I only have 2 books left from the last video that I said I was gonna talk about. I'm gonna talk about them both today and talk about what's gonna be coming next, what I'm gonna be reading over the next month or so. And the first one is the Dark Fantastic, Dark and Stormy. Race and Imagination from Harry Potter to the Hunger Games by Ebony Elizabeth Thomas. I was really interested in it. If you guys regularly watch my stuff, you know that talking about race and fantasy and race in the world is something that I do all the time. As a passing biracial woman, this is something that is like very integral to my life. This book was really interesting to me, especially because it's from Harry Potter to the Hunger Games. And if you watch my stuff, you might know that I'm deeply obsessed with Harry Potter. It's a nonfiction. I'm not really a nonfiction reader, and this book discusses Black people in fantasy in general, but Black girls in fantasy specifically, and specifically it talks about Rue in the Hunger Games, Gwen in Merlin, Bonnie Bennett in The Vampire Diaries, and Black Hermione in Harry Potter. The discussion is kind of the cycle of the Black girl in fantasy, and that there are 5 different steps, and I made notes because it was tough. So really briefly, here it is. Step 1 is the spectacle, so that character comes in as like an otherworldly or not supposed to be there. Step 2 is hesitation, like this dark-skinned person is kind of interrupting what would normally be a white landscape. Step 3 was violence and like how this character is dealt with. And that could be a numerous thing. It doesn't necessarily need to be physical violence. It could be mental violence. It could be a witch being stripped of her powers to save her white counterpart, like my understanding of The Vampire Diaries, what happened to Bonnie Bennett. Step 4 is a haunting, so that like the character is still there, but they're a shadow of their former self, like Rue was throughout the Hunger Games. After she inspired Katniss and died, she haunts the rest of the series, kind of. 5 was emancipation. So like, can this character break free of the cycle of the Dark Fantastic? And this book, it was really interesting to read, and I think the most interesting thing about it is that it made me realize for the first time why none of the kids, this is a little stereotypical, but like why none of the kids I played basketball with ever read any of the same stuff I did. And it's the idea that fantasy is a privilege, and I'm including myself in this because I'm passing and because my family was middle class, I guess. We have the space in our lives and in our minds to fantasize about magic, whereas for other people who are not as privileged, their fantasy is to like be safe and financially secure, you know? Like it was an interesting way, and like maybe I misinterpreted what the author was saying, but that was something that I kept thinking of throughout reading it. I actually listened to this as an audiobook, but I will say I was a little disappointed with this book in a few ways, but I think maybe the reason was I'm not that kind of smart to read this book and be able to process everything. I think I'm gonna have to read it a couple times. It was written like a thesis. Like she would outline what she was going to tell me. You know, in this next section, I'm gonna break down this, and I'm like, I don't care, just tell me. Like, I'm already here. Yeah, cool, great. Tell me whatever you want. Like, just tell me, I'm already here. And so I didn't really love that about the writing style. It was very academic, and that kind of took me out of it. The way I am, the stuff that I like I want the story element, you know? The other thing that was kind of distracting for me is that in the title of the book, it says from Harry Potter to the Hunger Games, but it maybe should have said from the Hunger Games to Harry Potter, because Harry Potter was the thing that she talked about last, and she barely talked about it. The whole time I'm listening to this book, I'm like, talk about Harry Potter. And the majority of stuff she talked about with Harry Potter was her own personal experience as the token black woman in Harry Potter fandom. And this was early in Harry Potter fandom when like not a lot of people were on the internet writing fan fiction and whatnot, and she was one of the only black fans. And that's very interesting, but not what I read this book for. Like my main motivation for reading this book was that it was going to talk about diversity in Harry Potter, and that's not at all what I got. I got a little bit of black Hermione, and that's it. And honest to God, I don't think Hermione's black. Obviously, I am Hermione. Well, a Hufflepuff version of Hermione. I always thought, since I first read the book in grade 4, I always thought that Hermione would look like me. Brown bushy hair. I'm like, that's me. That's my life. My life is brown bushy hair. Do you know how long it took me and my hair to form the relationship that we have now, where it generally does what I want? Yeah. Probably about as long as it took Hermione to figure out the Yule Ball hairstyle too. But even that, like she straightened her hair and was suddenly beautiful. Of course she's biracial. Of course. I lived my whole... That's another video. For the Dark Fantastic, I would have been really interested to hear Ebony Elizabeth Thomas's opinion on the diversity in the background of Harry Potter, because I think in terms of the mainstream media books that I read, Harry Potter was quite diverse. Like the Patel twins are Indian, Cho is Chinese, Lee Jordan, Angelina Johnson, and Lavender Brown are black, and Dean Thomas. And then Hermione's me, you know? That's a lot. There's a lot going on, but that's all in the background, right? It's never any of the lead characters. And one thing that I can't believe she didn't talk about, Lavender Brown in the movies was black until she started dating Ron. Then they recast her for a white girl. So there was a lot missed, but I'm also a freak for Harry Potter. So I guess that's kind of to be expected. I wasn't gonna get what I wanted there anyways. Do I look super washed out with this lighting? It's raining outside. I usually do it when it's sunny. Is that better? Worse? The same? Guys, lighting is really hard and I don't get it. I really wish that I knew a little bit more about the Vampire Diaries and Merlin reading this book, because those are two things that I have no concept of. I never read the Vampire Diaries, never watched a show, never watched Merlin. One thing that I found frustrating was that apparently part of the reason why Merlin's Black Gwen was problematic was the fan response. She talked a lot about the fan response and how towards the end of the show the fans were more interested in slash romance between Merlin and Arthur than a biracial romance between Arthur and Gwen. And I'm kind of like, okay, I'm more interested in her being totally stripped of all of her agency, but yeah, we can be mad at the fans for wanting to see a queer couple when we never see that, you know? So, I don't know. I also know that my upbringing is such that I have a very different opinion than a lot of women of color, and that's totally fine, and like different views are important, and I learn from women of color and everybody all the time. I don't know if I've put out my video of Cursed yet by the time this one will be up, but I did watch another review of Cursed where the person who watched it hated the show, and I had a great time watching that messy show. But one of the things she said is that they didn't market it well and they should have been marketing it as a Black Arthur show. And I was kind of like, well, it's not about Arthur, it's about Nimue. And also I really liked that it was a total non-issue. It wasn't even discussed. It wasn't recognized that there was diversity in this show. It was just like, yep, this is the world. And like, why not? We're talking about fae and magic and it's set in Englandish, you know? So I just really liked how it was totally ignored. And I think at the end of the day, if you want to find a problem with something, you're going to find a problem with it. Myself included. For the Dark Fantastic, I give it 3 out of 5 Harry Potter lightning bolts because it didn't talk about Harry Potter enough and maybe some of it went over my head. I can definitely see myself reading this book again and liking it more. But as of right now, you get 3 out of 5. The other book, the romance book that I read this past month, was called The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hung. And it was about a girl with Asperger's named Stella who wants to be comfortable having a sexual relationship with somebody and wants practice because she's never had good sex before. So she hires Michael, the escort with the heart of gold, to teach her how to be good at sex. And he's only escorting because he has to make money for some other thing and he doesn't really like it and blah, 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 whatever, which like is fine for the character and makes total sense, but also some people just like their job and they're sex workers, you know? And you know what? If it was legal, everybody involved would be safer. But that is another conversation. It's a really sweet and fun, endearing story. I really like the characters of Michael and Stella. Interestingly, I read Stella as Asian. Like, I was listening to the audiobook of it and I thought she was Asian, but I actually don't think she is. I think she's white. And Michael is biracial, white and Asian. This is a very stereotypical romance. There's not really any real spoilers, so there's no worries of being spoiled for this if you want to read it. One thing that was a little annoying but more understandable because Stella has Asperger's is the miscommunication ending, but again, very typical of most romance novels. More importantly to me is the chemistry and how the sex scenes were written, and they were both done very well. I felt a lot of chemistry in the first half of the book of them like really building a relationship before they slept together, and the sex scenes were written well and they weren't like gross, but they were good. This book was written in a dual perspective, and I always enjoy dual perspective romances. The side characters weren't super developed, but some of them were okay. Like Michael's sisters were great. We meet his family and that was nice. There are moments that are super cringy in the book, but unlike in other romance novels where I feel like moments are cringy, Stella is also cringing. Like, we're feeling what she feels, and so that was really cool. It was cool to have a little bit more diversity in the sense of like Stella is autistic, and I've actually never read a book about or with an autistic person in it, and maybe that's a failing on my part. And yeah, I gave the Kiss Quotient 3.5 out of 5 Harry Potter lightning bolts. I think just because it was basic. Like, it was a basic romance. It didn't do anything extra special, but it was really fun, and I had a good time reading it. It was an easy read. I basically forgot that this was here. I fell off the healthy wagon this week, guys. I had half a pizza and 2 fried eggs on top for breakfast today. Not ideal. Before I get to what I'm reading this month, if you haven't watched any of my Hannah's Overbooked videos before, I'm also an author, and my book Magic Required is available at any bookstore that has a major distributor, so Chapters, Barnes & Nobles, Kohl's. It's also on Amazon. It's an urban fantasy novel set in the near future that follows the story of a Celtic demigod named Lachlan Allele as he tries to seek a redemption he's not sure he deserves. The second book of this, Dominion Required, is coming out on November 26th, and I would tell you the synopsis of that, but it's totally a spoiler for the first one. So if you're interested in reading a synopsis of that, you can find that on my Instagram page at hspaisley. You'd have to scroll down the feed a little bit, but there's a big picture of the cover. You'll see it. You can also find that on my website at hspaisley.com. What I'm reading next. So a few weeks ago, I did a Witcher and Wizards video, and I'm going to be doing another one of that, where I'm reading a Harry Dresden book and some of The Last Wish. Right now, I'm on the second Dresden book, Full Moon. I'm almost done, so that video will be coming out shortly. And I am working my way. I have more little tabs than last time, but I think some of them are just like, they mentioned this person I know from the show. Yeah, I'm gonna read not just one short story because it was pretty short. I think I'm gonna read all of chapter 2. I'm not sure how long that is, but I think it's 2 short stories is chapter 2. So I'm gonna do that for The Last Wish. And I will be finishing up Full Moon, which I'm listening to in audiobook form, and Jibs Marsters read to me. I'm a Buffy fan. I'm just a sucker, you know? I'm a very slow reader, and most of the books that I read are audiobooks. And even though I think that does count as reading, even though a lot of people don't, I do, I still want to get better at absorbing information off of a page because I'm particularly bad at that. So one thing that I did the last time I was in Chapters was I went to the young adult section, and one of the books that was on sale for $6, The Last Immortal by Alex Marlowe. And I started reading it, and it's pretty good so far. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in another video, actually. I think I cut it out. If I mentioned this in another video already and I didn't cut it out, sorry. The back of the book is like interesting-ish, but on the dust jacket, it says Percy Jackson meets the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen meets Sherlock. Wow. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that is my kind of trash. I love that movie. I kind of rewrite parts of it in my head, but so much fun. So as soon as I read that, I was like, $6? Cool cover? Sold. The print is pretty large, which I like. The chapters are short. Like, it's a middle grade book, and I'm totally fine with that because reading it quickly makes me feel accomplished. The other audiobook that I have waiting for me, I actually have a Robin Hobb one, but I think I'm gonna save that for next month because the other book I have waiting for me is The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. And I actually listened to the first maybe 20 minutes of it, and I was so confused. I had no idea what's going on. I stopped. I'm gonna have to start again because there's a prologue, and it was just weird. I think I really need need to like sit down and listen to it and not do stuff and listen to it. And I think because like I'm also writing a couple novels at the same time, so I often have been like drifting this past month because I'm having a little bit of writer's block. I'm finding that a little bit with Full Moon. I'm not sure if this one just isn't gripping me as much as the first one was. Did you see that fly? I'm gonna start the 5th season again because I've heard great things about it. And the last 2 books that are on my list for the next month or so, The Umbrella Academy. I'm so excited! My neighbor had them, which is great because I wasn't trying to spend $45 on these comic books. Doesn't the cover just look so cool? If you haven't seen it, that's the cover for the first one, and here's the cover for the second one. I'm very excited to get into it, especially since I finished Umbrella Academy in a day, like a psycho. And if you have a great romance recommendation, please let me know. I've said before on Hannah's Overbooked that I'm writing a romance novel, so I'm trying to read a romance novel every month, maybe every 6 weeks or so. Because I'm not as familiar with the genre, and now I'm writing it, I'm trying to get a little bit more familiar. So if you know a good one, please let me know, recommend it in the comment section. And lastly, at the end of all of my Overbooked videos, I ask 2 questions. But quickly before that, if you've made it this far with me, please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video with another nerdy or bookish friend. That would be very, very helpful for me, and it's a really easy and great way to support me. If you have already subscribed, double thumbs up to you. Thank you very much. If you've made it this far in the video, I hope you're having a good time hanging out. Okay, so my questions, my last questions. How much of this is left? But then I don't really taste the rum. I can add more rum. Grocery store sunflowers don't last very long. They look really sad. They're like, oh, no sun. Okay, 2 questions for you. When you're reading a book, how are you imagining the race of the characters that you're reading? Like, do you assume that people look like you? Do you whitewash characters? Do you pay special attention to what the author is telling you? Part of the reason I'm asking this is because I read The Dark Fantastic, but also because when I was reading The Kiss Quotient, I thought that Stella was Asian, and I'm pretty sure that she's not. I don't know why I did that in my mind, but I definitely thought she was Asian. I swear I am the Hufflepuff Hermione. And also, I hated the book The Name of the Wind, but now I'm starting to question, like, if Voth wasn't a white ginger and was a biracial woman, would I have hated it? I probably would have loved it, but I just couldn't relate to the character. And my second question is related to tropes. What is your favorite and least favorite tropes in any genres at all? This question is, of course, related to The Kiss Quotient because they did have the misunderstanding trope at the end, which was frustrating, but I mean, like, how many things can go wrong, you know, in our modern world that are gonna cause tension? A misunderstanding is the easiest one, is actually one that I'm like working really hard not to have in my novel, and it probably will be there. One of my favorite tropes across all genres is the found family trope. And I think maybe because my family is so weird and because I play basketball, the idea of found family is just so appealing and heartwarming to me. And you know, I just love love. So that's great. And my most hated trope, I don't even understand how this still happens. And maybe I'm just like reading old books or something, but the alpha male who's not secure in his masculinity. What is happening here? Like, are you an alpha male or are you not? Don't tell me you're this big bad guy with your cowboy boots and your gun, but you're afraid to cry in front of people. Get out of here. Either you're secure in your masculinity or you're not, you know? And if you're an alpha, you should be secure in your masculinity, and if you're not, you should be in therapy. It's okay that you feel, bro. That's kind of another topic altogether. All right, I think that's it. Be cool if you bought my book and told me about it. If you don't, that's cool too. Please review it, that helps me a lot too. Again, please like and subscribe. Thanks to Erik Faucon, who writes all my theme songs, and as usual, may the force be with you. Live long and prosper, and don't let the muggles get you down. Let's talk about books, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about books.